Funny Girl takes place in 1929 New York City, Chicago, and kind of other various points of interest. At the early 20th century, Fanny Brice is a child actor who had a lot of success in her early career, but as she got older, it started to dwindle a little bit. Now she is trying to come back into the light as a performer and kind of seek work, and that's where we find Fanny in the early 1920s. It also follows her romantic life as she meets the charming but sleazy Nick Arnstein and how their relationship impacts the play going forward. So, right off the bat of the show, and well, more or less the production of this show, there's a lot of controversy behind Beanie's casting choice as Fanny Brice. You know, Fanny Brice was made so popular by Barbra Streisand, and people wonder, you know, this character needs a star, it needs that star power. Does an actress kind of carry that sense of kind of scale behind their work? How good is the actor with their singing abilities, their acting abilities, etc. Now, I'm not one to say anything because I'm not a professional singer or dancer or anything like that, actor or anything, but this role is very cherished by many people in the theater community, which rightfully so. It's extremely popular. It's been done in numerous productions throughout its history, only once on Broadway. So bringing a play like this back to Broadway it's very, you're not going to please every single crowd, let's just say. And does Beanie kind of live up to that legacy that Barbra gave many years ago? Now, to be completely honest, I'm not really focused on the legacy aspect of this production, or is an actor good enough to fill these shoes. That to me is more of like the drama behind the curtains, and I can see if someone wants an actor or kind of like a Dreamcast type of situation, which we all think of and do for certain, plays or movies or anything, but I don't really want to talk about is Beanie good enough for this role, because I actually did not see Beanie in this role. We saw her understudy, Julie Benko, so I'm actually basically reviewing the show with Julie instead. So the first thing I want to talk about in this review is Julie Benko herself. Considering the fact that she has this role, she is the predominant figure of the play, she is the greatest part of the show. If I did not know any better, or if I went into the show completely blind, I would have thought that she was the lead runner, she was selling the tickets, everything. She was phenomenal, and I'm not the only one who shares this opinion. You go on Reddit, YouTube comments, or anywhere that is discussing Broadway or theater, and people who have seen Julie are championing her in this role. I went back and listened to some of Barbra's, songs, and they're great, and I don't have too much of a connection of the original production or movie or anything, but I actually will go as far to say that Julie is the star, and I don't see this show without Julie. I think that she was just beyond perfection, and I think the word perfection is almost underselling how well she did. I have a bit of an issue that when I got into the theater, a lot of people saw her as the understudy and were getting upset that, oh, who is this person, or I want my money back, or, there are people out loud before the show started who were literally, saying awful things about her and awful things about the production now, saying that they're gonna essentially get, half of their money's worth. And those same people who were chirping were the first ones on their feet just lauding her and saying how amazing she was. I think that that's not right as an audience to do. I'd go as far as to say that I don't think that that's right at all for an audience to ever walk into a show and start casting judgment before they even see the show. It's rude to the performers, it's rude to everyone around you, it's rude to all the staff, the crew, just anyone who is putting their time and energy into a production, and you walk in there and go, oh, okay, this is going to be bad because so-and-so is not at the show. I know that there is, standbys for Hugh Jackman in The Music Man, and I heard Max did an amazing job. I've not seen that show, but I don't think that you should ever seek to refund your ticket because the actor make that commitment that night. Don't get me wrong, there is a sense of like, feeling maybe bad that the actor couldn't come on that night or whatever, you're spending your money, but to get what we got that night with Julie was phenomenal, and I don't think I would ever want to trade that experience for anyone or anything else. I just cannot express how great she was, and I want to try to put into words as we go on with this review, but if I had to sum up this show right now and kind of end this review, this moment, I would want to headline Julie Benko and plaster it on the August Wilson Theater, and I wish that people were championing Julie enough for this role. And I know that the people who have seen her are, but I wish the community and everyone around her was lifting her up. And don't get me wrong, I know there's revenue and sales, and there's a business aspect of it, but I don't care in the end, because I like seeing art for art's sake, enjoying a performance, and I get the business stuff, like I'm not trying to dismiss it, but I am blown away by Julie. So to kind of jump into the story now, I found the two acts to be kind of a mixed bag. I found the first act, in my opinion, I know some people might feel different ways, I think the first act was far superior than the second act in terms of the pacing, the structure of where the story was going, kind of overall enjoyment of the musical numbers, I thought was primarily all in the first act. I think the second act kind of hiccuped in its middle, but I think towards the end kind of rebounded and kind of, saved the show. I know that there is a history behind some people not fully loving this plot, or maybe not saying Nick Arnstein is a fully well-developed character. We'll go into that soon, but in terms of just what act did I simply think was more of a bang for your buck, I easily think the first act was so much more lively. There was so much more, building of the story, seeing the characters on what they want, where they're going, and how they end up where they get, versus the second act where it's the kind of like resolution of the issue. The first act was just incredible. It had some of the best moments of the dancing, of the musical numbers, of kind of just the show being in your face and being that sense of kind of like Broadway spectacle. I think you get a lot more just before the intermission. So the opening of the show basically is Fanny trying to audition for roles to get back in kind of the entertainment industry, to kind of, get her name back out there, and her mom is played by Jane Lynch, who supports her, but it's also like very critical of her figure, of her as a kind of like a person, and kind of just saying that beautiful girls get these jobs and everything. Her character was never one for her looks, Fanny Bryce's, and it's kind of like, I don't want to say in some ways some of these characters are trying to have Fanny give up on her dreams, but they're always not so supportive, but they're also kind of supportive. But I think it's kind of that feeling of reach for the stars, but maybe not go too high type of feeling, and Fanny is kind of very against that, and I almost want to argue oblivious in some ways how Benko portrays her, and it's really kind of cute where everyone in the room might be saying, hey, you don't want to say yourself too sure, or you might need to, or blah, blah, blah. And she's like, oh, yeah, like, whatever. Like, just, like, kind of words entered, then words left. And I think that it kind of shows the sense of optimism and naiveness this character has. And then she kind of strolls in on a production that, is going on, like, I guess near her, and she wants to try out. So it's a bunch of girls dancing and kind of going into a beat, and Benko kind of walks in there and starts kind of grooving, and she has a very like fun Brooklyn accent that sounds like she's not super educated, or she's kind of like rough and tough and kind of speaks her mind type of gig. Everyone around her stops dancing, and she kind of keeps going, and they're like, what are you doing? And she's like, oh, I'm dancing, It's that sense of kind of like hopefulness that Benko brings to his performance, that it's just fun and endearing to watch, because she doesn't care who's watching her, she doesn't care who is judging her. I think that there's a sense of fearlessness that Benko provides to this role that I don't think any other actor could really give. It was just a lot of fun, to be completely honest. What's great about Benko's performance, and say this scene in particular, is you have to remember that this is the 20s, where, say, there is a lot of gender roles that need to be filled, class roles, whatever, and seeing girls, I guess, in some ways chase their dreams, or, not, kind of, they're usually regulated towards having kids, or kind of being like moms or wives, or, kind of that stereotypical era that, women or men had certain roles to fulfill. And here is Fanny, what Benko is showing her, just kind of coming out on the scene and is just exploding. She makes the whole scene about her without even trying. And it's just nice to see that this show, in a lot of ways, rightfully explores that sense of character, kind of not caring about what is expected of you, but more of just wanting to be oneself. So speaking of the character having kind of this unapologetic nature to her, kind of jumping forward by like a scene, kind of like in that same like time frame, Benko's character gets to the first musical number and sings "I'm the Greatest Star." This moment in the show was just, I thought was one of my favorites, because one, it really got to show Benko kind of going full force, all out. It was just such an amazing thing to experience, because it shut the audience up in the regard of any condescending or negative implications they could have had going in. And I'm not kidding, she literally blew the socks off of everyone in the audience. When that number ended, people just bursted with applause, and I don't think I'd ever seen like an audience kind of go that crazy before, because she won everyone over. Any of the naysayers, anyone like my brother and I who were rooting her on the whole time. It was just so much fun to see. But in the scene, the character Fanny is auditioning to kind of get into that group, to kind of show any talent what she's capable of. Julie just gives, she just like resonates with some of the lines in "I'm the Greatest Star." She just burst out and gives the most enthusiasm of just certain particular words, like in the lines. When she said it, I was like, whoa, like, this is like just, it's almost like she's dripping with enthusiasm for the material, and it just shows that she likes what she's doing. It's hard in a lot of ways for actors to see these lines every night and make something new. On this line, do I do this? On this word, do I do that? But then you can kind of get all up in your head and kind of have these preconceived notions of, oh my goodness, like, I'm kind of feeling more of like a robot than anything. And you don't ever get that sense with Benko. You feel like any night she could have performed this song, this number particularly, she could have used any of these words in any of these lines and chose any single one to kind of emphasize or to kind of draw on a bit more, and it sounded so natural. I couldn't get over like the way she was just furious on stage of just making herself known. It was so beautiful, and the set was kind of great in this moment, because they have this kind of like high-rise ladder in some ways kind of come on the stage, and she soars up, and it shows like kind of her confidence boosting, where she feels like where physically and mentally she kind of feels like she's on top of the world singing this song, and she doesn't care about any of the naysayers. In a lot of ways, I felt like that could have just been through the performer, but through the character as well. She's just in the music. It shuts not only the characters up in the show, but it shuts the audience up. And all of a sudden, now everyone in the story and everyone in the theater is rooting for her. And it's almost like this double kind of feeling you feel with the actor and then with the character. So it kind of makes the art into real life, and I love that moment. She won the audience over. I was already rooting for her from the start, but seeing everyone collectively just go, yep, she is the star, and the song is about being the star. It's such a great feeling to have. Oh my god, like I adore that number. Jared Grimes, who plays Fanny's, basically like, one of our best friends in the show, has just this amazing tap dancing sequence where he's performing. It's so great. I think one of the best things about musical theater or anything put to stage or film is you often forget that there are professionals doing these shows. And what I mean by that, say you watch football, for example, and you go, okay, yeah, I can toss a 80-yard pass, like, pinpoint accurate, and you go outside and then you're like, I can't do it, because these people are, you know, literally trained, or hockey players who skate around all day and don't break a sweat, because they're training to be that good, they're professionals. And seeing Jared Grimes tap dance as Eddie and just put on a show and acknowledge the audience at times, like he's literally, because he's performing as the character for an audience, he's also simultaneously putting on a show for us, you know, and it kind of breaks the fourth wall in a lot of ways, but good, because I don't think I've ever seen tap dancing done not only that well, but to have an actor face an audience of around, I think it was 1,200 people I heard, but to face that many people and to be that confident with just doing your own thing, it's almost hard to put into words how great of a sequence this was, seeing him by himself, just destroying the stage. You go seeing him twirl, seeing him spin, seeing him go on his toes to his heels, to flip-flopping this and that. It was a truly marvel to be seen. I think that anyone who enjoys tap dancing or dance as a whole would literally get their money's worth just on that particular sequence alone. It was phenomenal. That was easily one of the best parts of the show, was just seeing Jared just rip up the stage in that moment as Eddie. Seeing professionals do their things often makes you feel as if you want to go do them, like I made that football or hockey kind of analogies. But the idea that it makes you kind of want to do it is it's such a great feeling. It shows that a performer or an artist is growing on you, because you are kind of getting inspired by it. You feel as if you can do it. And it's such a great feeling to have whenever you walk out of a theater thinking, wow, I would love to do that, even if it's just for fun. There's a great moment where when Benko and Romello, who plays Arnstein, meet, where you can kind of tell that they're pretty much, they come from like almost opposite worlds. Benko's character is very hot-headed, she speaks her mind, she's not always like ladylike, where Arnstein is very, he's suave, he's chill, he kind of speaks money first, people are second. He finds her like attractive or finds her like interesting, and Benko doesn't really know how to feel about this, but she's very kind of flabbergasted by him, because she's like, oh my goodness, you know, someone thinks I'm cute, or thinks I'm very creative or talented. And this is a great moment in the show where she is up in his face trying to get to know him, being like, you know, kind of like, what's your deal with this and that, and she gets like swooed away, and Benko's like, oh my goodness, like, you know, and she looks out into the audience, and everything stops and the lights go on her, and she starts like saying his name 20 times. She cuts back, starts talking to him again, gets swooed again, gets kind of like, you know, like wished away with everything. I think anyone can relate to kind of being in that situation where someone who you might admire or you think is kind of out of your league starts talking to you. You're like, oh, like, how do I not sound like a fool right now? And you can tell she's out of her depth in this conversation. It's super fun to watch. When it comes to the negotiation of the scene with the theater, Arnstein sees potential in Fanny, so he essentially tries to up the price of what the theater is paying her. Benko is caught in the middle between the owner of the theater and Arnstein. They both have a back and forth of, you know, we'll pay her $10, $20, $30, but, you know, and it's kind of both men going back and forth, upping their price, and they both stop and say like at like 100, and there's a moment where Benko just looks around, like it looks at him, and it's like come on, like more, and it's that physical comedy just landed so much, because not only in staging, Benko was the tiniest one out of the three people, but it's almost like she never has heard that much money in her life, so she's almost like drooling from the mouth, like hearing these prices, and the moment it stops, she's like, oh no, like, you can't keep going, like, we don't have to stop. And it's super funny. You know, it's that small moment of that comedy where that doesn't always land unless you have these actors be able to sell it in kind of their likeness. And Benko at this point in the show was so likable that it just became funny. She wasn't trying to be funny, and that's kind of the best comedy, you know, nothing feels forced. I think that this show wants you to be a really big fan of Fanny at this point, and I was a huge fan, so it just made that joke land so much more when you feel as if the actors and characters being so endearing in that moment. There is one more moment I do want to mention that I really do enjoy in the first act particularly, where Benko, his character, is invited to do Follies. She is, very kind of being herself for Ziegfeld's production. Benko walks out and is like, alright, like, I have changes, I'm me, we're not doing this, we are doing this, we're changing the ending, and how the show is done is Ziegfeld is kind of like right now just a voice, like kind of like this over-empowering voice, like in the back of the theater, like to the front, so the whole audience can hear him. And Benko just kind of stopped in her tracks and goes, "All right, you know what? We can do what you want. Like this is your show, buddy." And then she goes, "Well, how about we do this?" And then like Ziegfeld just kind of yells her name, and then she starts like bowing down, being like, "No, like I didn't mean to overstep. Like I'm sorry." And it's so fun and cute to see her kind of have that physical comedy of just being like, oh, like kind of bowing down, and she's like, oh no, yeah, like no, but maybe. And it's super fun. It's super fun to see Benko just shine here. The closest I think of comedy nailing this hard in terms of the physicalness is the film The Nice Guys with Ryan Gosling, where every single scene Ryan was in, there was some physical gag that Ryan was doing where it wasn't just the words that were funny, but it's him getting his arm broken and screaming like a girl, or him holding a gun in a stall where he's using the bathroom and he's kicking open the door, but it just shuts behind him, so he's trying to act tough, but the door keeps shutting, so he's like fumbling around, drops his cigarette, drops his gun, can't get the door to open, and when he finally does it and looks intimidating, the guy can look at him through the mirror and go, yeah, you're using the bathroom. Even though that all that physical comedy is all directional, it's also physically done by the actor, but it's about how endearing they are. Comparing like Gosling in a lot of ways to Benko, it's all about how you feel about that actor, or about how they're just really being this character in that moment, where you just feel as if there's like a warmness to them, that you're happy that in a lot of ways that they're succeeding, and you can't have that if you don't feel a connection to the actor, or if you don't feel a connection to that character. That's when the comedy kind of falls flatter, is when you feel emotionally distanced from what's happening. So to kind of round out the first act with one of the biggest praises again, you can't not mention this play without mentioning Rain on My Parade. It's just, oh my goodness, it was my first time really ever hearing it, so that I finally got to like hear it, kind of like front and center, and oh my goodness, I just words can't describe how terrific Benko was. She just strides across the stage in this song. I just don't want any other actor for this role. Like, I truly don't. I'm sure Beanie is great, but just seeing Julie crush essentially the most famous song, and one of the most famous songs, like, you don't even have to know Funny Girl to know Nobody's Gonna Rain on My Parade. And to have that song, that legacy behind it, that sense of pressure, and to just walk it out and be center stage, be by yourself in that moment, and to just destroy it in front of everyone. My goodness, I don't think that there could be any other greater feeling as an actor to kind of have that experience. And I don't want anyone else. Like, she will always be Fanny to me. And I know, like, I'm gushing over her, and I don't always mean to, but the fact that I'm able to kind of gush this much just shows how wonderful that moment was. And I still have this, like, even now, I have this kind of mental image of Benko, like, center stage, destroying the final note before the curtain falls, and just being like wowed, and I think for anyone who has seen live theater, you have those moments where you have that mental image of where you were, or what you see that brings you back to that moment, to what you just witnessed, and that can be anything. And mine of the show is the end of the first act, seeing right before the curtains fall. I just see her finishing that note, and to me that's been one of my favorite experiences of the theater in a long time. Just seeing that final moment of her Finishing. Jane gives a motherly vibe to the show that I know that she plays a mom and it makes sense on paper, but seeing her perform, you feel as if she could be Fanny's mom, even like outside of the show. You know, Benko and Jane had this sense of this kind of like intimacy where I could see Julie and Jane before, during, and after the show, and seeing these characters kind of, you know, live on, where I think Jane as a mom now in the show gives her daughter advice, puts her up, knocks her down too, but does it in a way where she's never trying to discredit her daughter, but try to just say, hey, this is the world around you, this is what you can give, this is what you can't give, you have to see it beyond being naive. And it made me in a lot of ways think of just, wow, like this sounds like a mom, and then like, wait, goodness, she is playing a mom. But it's the feeling, I think, that is captured. You know, it's the feeling of this sounds like a mom who's parenting in her own way. It might not be every parent's way, but it's her way. And that's what I think what Jane brings to this role that other actors don't bring, is how she is the mom. Because you can't be the perfect mom, and also you can't be the perfect daughter, but every mom and every daughter relationship is different. And this one, I think, was beautifully explored, not by the lines, but how these actors look at each other, how they jump off of what they're saying, how they react subtly to what they're saying. Support, not support, you know, that's what Jane brings. I think one of the biggest issues in Act 2 was none of the musicals really kind of stood out to me. There is a scene where Nick gives a great number, kind of being a sleazy guy, all about money, and I think that scene of him performing is great, but I didn't really feel invested into his number. Not that the actor did a bad job, it was perfectly fine. I just wasn't really emotionally resonating with the character, and I think that in a lot of ways it feels as if there's just not a lot to the character. Like, yes, I do really think that him having issues with money is an interesting topic, of him needing to go to his wife for money but feeling ashamed because he feels like as if he needs to do it on his own. And that's a really relatable feeling as if you want to do things on your own, where you don't want to just rely on people, and especially with the gender kind of the norms in that area where it wasn't where it is today, or class norms. It's hard for someone like Arnstein, who appears wealthy or appears kind of like this alpha male needing help, and you feel for his plight of jumping into these bad situations financially, clawing his way out, falling back in, and kind of this like spiral where just nothing is working out. And for a lot of people that can happen to them, financial hardships. And I do really like that from the character, about how he berates Fanny at times by just being upset by himself, but not really at her, but not knowing how to convey his anger. But other than that, there's not really much to the character. That's pretty much all we get from that character. And I think that's where he feels a little bit underdeveloped, as not the performance or the show, but that character specifically, because he keeps repeating those lines in the show, the character, where you say a couple times, I get it, but when it's kind of all you have to say through the character, you lose that sense of impact. Because I understand now what your plight is financially, but now I need more. Now I need more. They need to be multi-layered, not just one thing that defines them. So the show is essentially at an upwards battle with itself. And I do think one minor criticism is the ending of the show, right before it ends and Fanny has her great number. Some of the scenes where the play is taking place doesn't really change in terms of the design, but it feels as if the play's topics are changing, like the topics of conversation are changing, and yet the staging doesn't really change itself. And some of the conversations that are have get kind of lost in the sauce when you start to mentally feel as if you're checking out, and then when the reprisal of Don't Rain on My Parade comes on, you kind of, at least for me, felt like you're taken aback a little bit. I was like, wait, what's going on right now? I was like, wait, we ended here, but weren't we just here? And like, it starts to feel a bit the same, if that makes sense. Like, the words are different, but everything around you feels the same. And I think it needed a bit more of a splash of just maybe changing some of the scenery here and there, but once again, it's not always a production, it's what the play was intended to be, but you can also tinker with it, and I think the show should have done that a little bit, kind of tinkered with where the characters were, or maybe kind of have a bit more of different staging, because when Fanny gets off of the tour and kind of in her dressing room, it doesn't change too much from that to the ending, and I think having a bit of scenery change would have made the second act a bit more of diversified. I think it needed that change, and to kind of keep the audience engaged. I know it's a bit of a kind of minor critique, but I do think in some ways that's where some people could have expressed with or without words how they kind of felt. And the energy kind of just stays kind of like a beeline. It just kind of just goes straight until the end. So to round off the show, I need to really say that I think Julie Benko is the star of the show. I truly from the bottom of my heart hope that one day she could headline her own show. I love, Jared Grimes, Jane Lynch, just the entire cast and crew who made this possible. I do think Funny Girl is worth your time, especially if you can support the understudy Julie. I think that understudies as a whole need to be championed, especially in a time with COVID and with the world being so drastic and changing all around you. You never know what can happen with a show or with anything around us, and to have someone like her come in at the 11th hour and save the production in a lot of ways, but to also just give such a phenomenal performance, it's just magnificent, and I really hope that everyone keeps kind of championing her name in the community. I know what's next for this show is new casting changes, and I'm not sure if I'm going to see the show again, but I would like to see where the show goes into the future. But in terms of what I experienced, I do think that this is worth your money. I do think that if you are a fan of the Funny Girl material, you will enjoy this ride. If you have not ever experienced Funny Girl before, or just simply want something to see in New York, once again, I don't think you can go wrong with this show. It feels very universal in a lot of ways, and compared to other shows that could feel a bit more mainstream, it's nice to see something kind of be brought back and just shown again to an audience or a generation that may have never grown up with Funny Girl, and for a lot of people this is a dream role for them, and it's nice to see people live out their dreams on stage, and in the end you can't really dislike that. Please, once again, if you can support Benko, go do it and you will not regret it.